Evergreen Brickworks is a park in Toronto, Ontario that opened in 2010. Located within the Don Valley, the park serves as a secluded, natural space within the busy city. But it is also much more than a park. According to its website, Evergreen Brickworks is a hub where people can experience sustainable practices that enable flourishing cities of the future. By weaving the area's history and ecology into its design narrative, Evergreen Brickworks provides a necessary reminder of what poor development can do to a landscape. At the same time, it serves as a clear example of how thorough, inclusive design can create a harmonious landscape for both natural and social processes. This also ties it into the identity of the city, clearly articulating its place and its narrative. The Evergreen Brickworks landscape can be analyzed using Simon Swafield's theories that configuring the modified and constructed ecologies of human settlement and production is a vital part of landscape architecture, and that creating successful landscapes requires active and critical mediation between site, place, and region. The former theory is shown through the site's historical elements, while the latter is clear in the modern developments. This contrast creates a very effective, engaging landscape and makes these theories quite obvious to anyone visiting the space, whether they're aware of them or not. The Evergreen Brickworks site was used as an industrial space for most of its history, beginning as the site of a paper mill in the 1830s. In 1889, while digging holes for a fence post, high-quality clay was discovered, which led to the creation of a successful brick factory and a massive quarry. Steam and blasting were used to extract the clay from the earth until the factory was closed almost a century later, in the 1980s. This, understandably, had a dramatic impact on the landscape, and it left the area hard, lifeless, and gray. In 2002, EVERGREEN, a non-profit company that focuses on supporting the sustainable development of cities, began to work on rehabilitating the site. It began with a considerable amount of community engagement to ensure that the landscape was a reflection of what the people of Toronto wanted. This highlighted a focus on protecting the natural environment rather than creating an attraction, and supporting access to the hard-to-reach site so that the public didn't really have to rely so much on cars. With this ongoing public input, Evergreen began to design the site and worked to remediate the brownfield landscape. The site, designed by Claude Cormier and Associates, was designed specifically to allow visitors to interact with nature, to learn about the importance of restoring and protecting natural ecological processes. They did this in part by, like Swafield suggests in the first theory, creating a historical awareness that allows visitors to really see how the landscape expresses ideas about natural and ecological sustainability. When you enter the massive park, you're greeted by these historical industrial buildings that were left on the site. They were purposefully rehabilitated to serve as a reminder of the landscape's history and to begin the narrative of its rehabilitation. These buildings house stores, cafes, and host events like farmers markets and antique markets every weekend. These public spaces are interspersed with gardens, streams, and educational spaces like this one, which featured a teepee and a wigwam. Walking out through the buildings, you exit out onto a large patio space that overlooks the pond and the quarry park. While the space keeps people separate from the landscape, it has a low ledge rather than a full railing, so people can get a close look at the river's edge. Following along the main path, another taller balcony provides a space to relax. This space is made from a metal grate, rather than paving stones like the balcony below, to allow rainwater to flow directly into the ground, but also to create this opportunity for people to clearly see what happens at the edge of the water. From here, the landscape is kept even more natural. Rough paths made from gravel or dirt provide a porous surface for drainage while allowing people to walk through the park. Many of these paths lead right up to the edges of the streams that are running through the valley, and once again allow visitors to experience and learn from the landscape. This really creates a sense of reverence as you walk through the park. The landscape's narrative tells the story of the city's impact on the delicate Don Valley ecosystem, and by interacting with the natural spaces in the park, visitors really get a sense of their impact on it. In the way Evergreen Brickworks allows for and encourages interaction with the landscape, the site meets Joan Iverson Nassauer's concepts of stewardship and neatness. While the landscape is kept natural and wild to protect the site's ecology, it shows conservation in the way the groomed paths interact with the landscape and vegetation. But it goes further than most landscapes by actually educating visitors on this theme. This idea is not just something that would be noticed by landscape architects and students, but is an idea that Evergreen hopes to impart on all of its visitors. Throughout the park, the narrative of its development is referenced in many different ways and at many different levels. There are references to the site's pre-colonial past in its plants and animals. This is explained in several plaques like this one, which highlights the removal of native plants and animals from the site as part of the rehabilitation. Walking through the park, you lose all sense of the city that's just outside the quarry. Unless you're really looking for the CN Tower, the meadows, trees, and streams are all you can see. But you never lose sight of the industrial buildings. The heritage buildings are left almost like scars on the landscape. Where a picturesque style park would have used follies to create idyllic scenes to distract from a site's more negative ecological past, the industrial past of the brickworks landscape serves to create a weighty reminder of our activities. When experiencing the park, this makes you aware of your own impact on the site, and it almost creates a desire to tread lightly for fear of interfering further. This makes the site's narrative feel very real and interactive. The ideals and theories behind Evergreen Brickworks can be seen at every scale, which makes Swafield's second theory very obvious. The idea of tension between culture, society, and ecological function is particularly poignant at many levels. On a personal scale, it can be seen in the interaction between visitors and the landscape. On the site scale, it can be seen in the way the landscape was designed to react to flooding, with buildings designed to mitigate flood damage with proper drainage. At the city scale, the tension is seen in the contrast between the city and the park. The park really looks and feels like an oasis, with the city in the background, and this is especially obvious with sound. As you walk up the steep path to the edge of the quarry, the meadow sounds become rapidly overtaken with the sound of the Don Valley Parkway just next door. On the way back into the city, traveling down that busy, noisy Don Valley Parkway, the park's themes of sustainability and stewardship are really cemented by the harsh readjustment to the city. After visiting the park, you start to notice the lack of stewardship and care in the rest of the city, and in particular the rest of the Don River. It really sinks in how successfully Evergreen Brickworks has managed to embody the idea of doing as little as possible, ensuring that from minimum resources and energy, maximum environmental and social benefits are available.